Painting Society didn't really have a primary, or maybe to put it differently, the primary activity of Oregon Painting Society was just to do everything as much as possible, kind of.
Yeah, Oregon Painting Society was a very interdisciplinary art collective, and we combined all of our different backgrounds. So we ended up making performances and installations and many other offshoots.
It was sort of like very worlding-centric practice, and so we sort of had this shared world with each other, and especially because we lived together, it got really deep and kind of intricate. And so in our art practice, we were making basically the materials of that world. True that we do have different artistic backgrounds.
I think we took a lot of the methods that we learned in the larger collective and applied them to this collective. Even though we're only 2 people, we think about our collaboration in terms of like a collective kind of mind.
Working with 5 people and sometimes more in Oregon Painting Society, it's really not possible to function even if you have sort of individual ownership of ideas and if you're not willing to go with other people's ideas. And so we just had really internalized that working method. But on a practical level, we have taught each other our skill sets, and so we try to always know both, like have fluency in the different technical aspects of what we're doing.
And often we'll like pass things back and forth, so one of us will start a sculpture and then pass it to the other person and they'll add on to it and pass it back. Sometimes it functions like that, or other times it will function like we each take kind of a different role in the project. But we really try to have both of our hands on everything.
Yeah, and I feel generally like the practice is like, I don't know, like a river or something, and we're like, maybe like a circular river, and we're like just drawing from it, you know, so even if only one of us works on one element in a piece, it's drawing from this like continuum that is informed by both of us.
The circular.
So, yeah, difficult metaphor. So.
On the massage interview.
Really?
Well, when you talk about the feedback between the audience and like the installation,
right.
I think it's the same kind of.
Yeah,
I think
it's
we've
a slightly
often used
different.
the metaphor of like water flowing down a river and then moving the rocks to shift the how the water flows.
Yeah, that metaphor is talking about light audio feedback, because I guess it sort of has this fluid, like flowing quality, but in a river, there's like a surface that will often be like an emergent form that's sort of stable, even though the water's flowing over it. And it can be similar in our light audio feedback systems, where until you move it, it will have this emergent shape, even though it's flowing. So I guess we just like river metaphors.
We're interested in creating complex dynamic systems that we and other people can experience as part of that system. So I think our hope is that the system that we've built has a dynamic enough form that someone experiencing it can feel that they are part of the system and dancing with it.
Yeah. Also, oftentimes when we make installations, the different aspects of the installation are kind of in feedback with one another in different ways. But oftentimes the different aspects of the installation inform one another, and so they have to kind of emerge like simultaneously. So there's feedback in that aspect of the work too. In terms of like emergent systems or feedback, one of the reasons why we find that so compelling is that it's a really natural system. You see examples of it everywhere. And so, sort of, I think, initially we were interested in using that sort of structure in our music because we thought of it as a very natural way just to like give sound form, and also a very natural way to interact with sound. But then, because we collaborate, that's a form of feedback, and we just started seeing it everywhere in our practice. So
I do feel like we try to create models of our reality in a way. So although this is a very abstract world that we've built, I think in some ways we're trying to reflect a certain structure that we find in reality every day. Just in like the sensory reality of feedback as like an embodied human going through the world.
yeah.
It feels very logical to use both natural objects and electronic like objects together because that's what's around us all the time, right? Like walking on the street, we have the tree and we have like the electrical pole like going up next to the tree. So I think in our lives they're always connected anyway, so it feels natural to continue that connection into like our aesthetic palette.
Yeah, and natural forms are a really big source of inspiration in our electronic music. So that's a reason why we do it. Late era Oregon Painting Society, we started doing installations that were very like sort of aesthetically drawing from the Oregon coast. We had this really specific vision of the Oregon coast at night because OPS would often like, or not that often, but when we could, we would go to the Oregon coast and just like spend the night on the beach.
It's this very special zone because it's like, you know, the edge of the world, it feels like, and it's like this void, and it's also very simple. There's like ocean, then a strip of sand, and then like this grass. But within that, there's like this limitless like fractal complexity. So we drew a lot of inspiration from that and used driftwood and shells kind of to bring that kind of that environment into our world.
Yeah, the beach at night felt like a simulation, and also like, you know, also made of a lot of silicone. So we started thinking of it as a supercomputer. And so but it became very practical to embed electronics in shells and driftwood because you have to house the circuit inside something, and we wanted to house it inside like beautiful sculptural things. And so we were doing that before we started using digital fabrication, excuse me, for our sensors and synthesizers. It was a physical scenario that was expanding the types of like interactions with space or material that you would like normally be able to have. So it had this like, you know, augmented or virtual aspect. And so in a lot of that work we had interactive light and sound, and then eventually we began using feedback systems between light and sound. And But I guess in all that work, it was really important to acknowledge the space as much as possible and acknowledge the different ways in which people would be interacting with the space. And there's sort of this thought that like there is like nothing behind the curtain in a way, or that if you looked behind the curtain, that would be like the installation too.
I think we started using lights because we were always really wanting the installations to be immersive, and light is a way to really control the space, or maybe not control, but
Modulate?
Yeah, modulate the space. And combining the light with the sound creates this kind of super sensory experience. So we kind of went down that path for that reason.
Yeah, and in this work, the light sort of serves as like this externalization of the VR user's experience, or almost a gradient between the VR user's experience and the other people in the installation's experience. The VR user isn't the only person experiencing the installation. They're actually, in a way, like a performer or an activator of the installation for the other people in the room. So their actions control the light and sound, and they can't even perceive the light. So it's for the other people in the room. This graphic pattern is a diagram describing the generative music system in the installation. Yeah, we became interested in this idea of making aestheticized diagrams or flowcharts or kind of graphic scores in a way. And we realized that, well, so by navigating the VR space, you sort of perform or activate the musical aspect of the work. And so that's done spatially. So it made sense for us to consider the diagram as a spatial thing to be navigated by the VR user.
And so in this piece, the world becomes a map, and then the map becomes the world, because as you're walking through the pathways of the diagram, they actually are holding the interactive objects in the virtual realm.
Yeah, so each of the sort of shapes on the floor is a two-dimensional symbol representing different aspects in the generative system, which in the virtual space there's three-dimensional sculptures that sort of lock into them. Each of the four levels has a slightly different floor, which is a different sort of cross-section of the diagram, because it can't be cleanly represented in just one level in this style, because there'd be too many arrows going everywhere. So the designs on the floor are actually all made in a 3D modeling program, even though it's a sort of a 2D vector. And the reason for that is that we've just developed a real sort of specific working method and fluidity in the 3D modeling program that sort of has a specific formal language or formal approach that at a very basic level usually involves like specific types of curves and specific types of ratios. But basically, when we use the 3D modeling program, I feel like we're just sort of pouring our consciousness through the software. And so it's very improvised, but with certain rules that we make up for ourselves, and also certain limitations from the software. And so I think if the forms have a certain like biological quality, I think that's just the result of our subconscious minds when we use the software like that.
So,
Perfect answer.
is it like pretty much made up in a coincident way or something?
Well, yeah, when we're sculpting, we don't think of a shape first and then make it. We often start with a cube and then we start to extrude the cube. And like he said, we'll have kind of rules in mind of like what angles we're going to use, but it's very intuitive. And then at some point it's like, okay, that's the shape.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually the work doesn't really involve like any type of visualization, usually for me, beforehand. The one exception to that I would say, personally speaking, is that actually the work, I'm so inspired by sound, and so if there's a certain type of electronic sound, sometimes we'll strive to represent that, but it's a very hard thing to do, actually, because it's so nonlinear. And so I feel like it's like this surface that you always move towards, but you never reach.
And I feel like sculpting in the computer is like a form of visualization almost. I feel like I'm visualizing something, but while I'm actually, building it.
Yeah, totally. So it just, I don't know, it's just the modern cyborg situation that we find ourselves in.
What would we like to create if there was no rules and it could be anything?
Wow, I think that's a really terrifying question. I think most people would go insane.
I think, the limitations allow us to create, maybe. In some ways, I feel like I'm already doing anything, but really, the limitations allow that. Yeah, you have to have.
Yeah,
I
think that we constantly are working in a balance between sort of like different types of freedoms and different types of limitations. And the rules that we set up for ourselves in our practice are really important because they sort of give shape to our efforts.
Do you actually, do you guys actually argue about like, oh no, it's getting too far?
Oh, good
Yes.
question. Yeah, definitely. It's something that we talk about a lot because, that's sort of like a big question. Where are the rules, and when is it good to break them or let them go or change them or come up with new rules?
Yeah.
Or where is it important to try to sort of be strict with these ideas that we're using?
Yeah, I feel like often maybe you'll be like very strict about a particular rule, like a diagram, like it has to mean, it's like this diagram has meaning, so we can't just like put that part over there. But I'm always like, well, I mean, it's fluid, like we could just move that part, He's like, no, that's the rule.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I feel it's a big thing in like, I feel like it's like a classic issue in electronic music, for example, where you could make any, not really, but there's this feeling that you could make any sound at any time, and so what do you do?
But I guess I feel like there's also intuitive rules that don't need to have a name or something, but it's like you just know when this is right or when it needs to change.
Mm-hmm. I feel
that's like another kind of rule.
I feel like those are more working methods, maybe. But yeah, it's interesting. I feel like in a lot of ways, our work has a lot of limitations, but those limitations are like the scaffolding for what we can make.
Well, I think our work is a practice. Yeah, like the most important thing is building up a framework for ourselves to be engaged with the world and with this investigation into this aesthetic realm that we're learning about and creating. So I think thinking about it as a practice keeps us focused on that aspect of what we're doing. Is this ongoing kind of, I don't know, learning, building lifestyle, more than like a specific projects here and there. I think the most important thing is like the flow.
Yeah, or the projects are sort of like the fruit that grows on the tree and the tree's the practice. Yeah, the practice.
Next to the river of the feedback.
Yeah, there's a river going by. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the practice is built up of all the projects and stuff, but it's the larger system.
Yeah, well, our lives are so unplanned right now because we're doing this lifestyle of constantly just traveling to the next thing. So I think we'll continue to do that and hopefully continue to just build our practice, which is, the most important thing, I guess.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to finding out what the next thing will be.